Then the higher form is poetry, right? Higher form is use of visuals like paintings and ganyan. And then the highest form of metaphors is music, right? And then music, in the sense that not that it only caters to your ears, but it caters to your heart, right? Anything that you feel, once it is being conveyed, and especially music, it has a deep, when it conveys an idea.
True.
And then it conveys emotions and so on and so forth, and ideas as well. Yun ang gusto kong matutunan. Okay. Now, you cannot explain this to the people just like that,
yes.
Because they have to grow into it eventually. But if you teach the right type of music, as of course compared to what you have now, the trash that you see now, you will see the difference of those that are, let's say, trained in classical culture, and those that are in the rock music, and then punk and so on and so forth. May kita mo ang diferensya. And ang effect sa atin, sa population. Now, I see also now that in many different countries, the Western world, Europe and the US, have started, because of what they're doing now, have started to de-emphasize classical music. Meron pa rin, may kita mo, but it's no longer reaching the grassroots. Whereas before, the classical music reaches the grassroots. And so they develop, right? Ngayon, okay, nandyan sila, pero very, very select. And then you have a select kind of audience, di ba? Ako, I believe na if you develop music, if you cannot start with grassroots, you can start here, but start working your way down and then up. But first, it has to be people who understand it, di ba? And those like you, who have that inclination or direction in your, you know what I'm talking about, might be important in precisely opening the minds of certain people. You don't have to open 1,000 minds, you only have to open 1 or 2 or 3, and then eventually it will be 10 and so on and so forth. So the way we tried to do it before is ganito. Ito, what this is a classical guitarist, right? Okay. We tried with our very, I'm not a musician, but with our basic knowledge of principle, we had a radio program that made these young people, young Silver, tsaka iba, talk on the air comparing rock music to classical, right? Tapos, then the listener, tinan mo, pakinggan mo ito, sabihin ganito. And then pakinggan mo naman ito. What's the difference? They discuss it. And then they discuss the impact on the listener and so on and so forth. Even if they don't understand classical music, you encourage them to say something about what it is. Ay, nakakantok. Di ba usually, ito yung unang-una nilang sasabihin. It is, hindi naman talaga nakakantok, pero they connote it with rest. Di ba? Rest means calm. When you're calm, you can think. On the other side, sabi ko, when you boom, boom,
Yeah.
no? And then trumpet, yeah, it does not connote rest, no? It connotes agitation and jumping around. But what does it do to your community to think? It doesn't, right? So, those people, na maski na papanong kasimple, paliwanag mong ganyan yung una, no? Na ano nila, na naiintindihan nila. And then you start evolving. Sayang yung anong yung programa, we only have about maybe 3 or 4 sessions. Then we had to leave the radio station and go to another station. Dahil yung station na binili ni Kibuloy. Kanya, hindi ayaw niya sa amin. Kasi anyway, kasi yung aking pinapag-usapan on about...
Yung sunshine?
Yes, sunshine. Dati na kasi I would talk about yung the nature of human beings. Meron akong konting ganyan kasi in order to explain certain things, yung nature of human being, we created in the image and likeness of God, diba? At dito lumalabas ang ating pagkakaiba dito sa mga ibang nilalang. And so I go that way. But it's not religion. It's just to understand what a human being is. Yes. Kasi pag hindi mo naiintindihan yung sa akin, hindi mo alam ang kapasidad mo. Ang kapasidad mo napakalaki. Hindi mo lang alam tap. No? It's tremendous power given to every human being, but they don't know how to tap it. Creativity, science, art, so on. It's almost limitless. Pero you have to know how to develop it and tap it. This is the basic reason why I was telling them I wanted something like this. So I was egging this guy. Buksan mo, wag kang matakot. Umpisahan mo yan. Ngayon, I was telling Cathy, diba sige na, yes, magaling siya dito. Nag-piano siya doon, dito. Ano ba siya? So now I'm asking, are you formally trained?
Yes,
Sa akin, whether you're formally trained or not, as long as you've got it, then you've got it. No? So at least you know what I meant about that. No? Because that's where the whole thing lies. No? Once they feel it, no? And then it becomes really the source of creativity. No? Countries like South Korea, China, Japan, at least here in Asia, nabi ko yung Western world, wala na. Dito, they're developing them.
Yes. Iba.
In China alone, they have 10 million students in piano.
Because lang, sigurado ko.
They have 7 million students in violin. And about 7 million in cello. And not all of them are going to be virtuosos, but you see, they inject classical music because somehow they realize that these people become whatever professionals. No? Like in the hood of China now, everybody running government is either an engineer or a scientist. In the whole government, you will not see lawyers.
Baigi. Good. Dito totoo. We have so many lawyers kasi they're not good kasi in administration. We need scientists.
Engineers and
scientists.
But all of them, classical music.
Ay, galing. Galing.
You see, then you can understand why China is like that.
Yes, diba?
And then you can also understand the type of development of South Korea and Japan.
Yes. Totoo yan.
Because it's there.
Yeah.
In South Korea lang, sabi nung teacher ko sa cello, pumunta siya doon. Isang buong football field, 10 years old and below, 3,000 children, cello.
Wow.
3,000 cellos, ha? And then yung pumukumpas, yung nandun sa stage ng tawag dito, ng grandstand na kasi buong football field yun eh. Alam mo yung football field na laki-laki na meron pang track, meron pang patakbuhan. Tapos nandun sa kumukumpas sa can you imagine? And you see the impact of the children. Ngayon sa atin dito, what did we do? We took out music before, and then you know where we put it? In physical education.
Yes. Nainis ako dyan.
Hindi ba?
Pinasok, anong alam naman natuturo ng sports sa music?
Kasi daw sa physical education may music.
Ano? Mali.
Mentality, di ba?
Yes, mali yan. Mali.
And then what do? You destroy the children.
Yes.
Kanya kung may time ka, you start on the show here.
Why not? I love that.
Yung ganyan ng concept.
May share lang ako sa inyo. Alam niyo ako, when I first performed sa Paris, yun na nag-inspire sa akin, 2006 pala yun. Even before pala. I always play OPM, classically arranged. Never ako nag-play ng OPM ng basta. It's always classical. My reason is ganito. Maybe it's in consonance with what you're saying. Kasi ang reason ko is people don't really appreciate classical music.
Yes.
They like pop. Binibridge ko yung gap.
Right, okay.
Yung OPM na nandito, tinataas ko classically para ma-appreciate siya ng mga nandito, and yet makikita nila yung kaibahan kasi classical. Yung mga classical naman, hindi rin sila mai-insulto kasi classical pa rin, pero magugustuhan nila kasi parang, wow, parang familiar, pero iba yung binibridge ko yung gap. That's what I always do. Every time na nagko-concert ako, I always put at OPM. Classical.
But the more important thing that you're doing there is that you're bringing them up rather than going down to the
No, I don't.
You see? You can see what mga ABS-CBN and all of them are doing. It's bringing music down to that level.
I hate it.
So it's gonna destroy
talaga.
A society. Pero kung mayaangat mo sila, because maski pa paano, yung classical na sinasabi natin classical, I'm not an expert. I don't even know the titles or whatever these guys have composed. But I know that it came from a certain principle. What they did came from a certain principle. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. There was a guy named Johannes Kepler. Yeah. He's an astronomer. Not an astrologer. Astronomer studied the planets. And he was in the 1600s. His discoveries, like the orbit of Mars and the rest of the planets around, and how long, distance, and so on and so forth, were made by his own 40-year study of how he observed the behavior of the planets and our relationship to them. And without a telescope. No? Just imagine how that might have been so difficult, but it had to take a long time. But his discoveries are up to now the basis of our flying to Mars, being able to hit Jupiter with the satellite and so on and so forth. Because of he had been able to compute the movements of the planets. Because he was doing this, and he knew that he found out that the orbit of the planets were unique, in the sense na yung iba yung orbit ng Mars, it's elongated, and isa naman mas circular. Nakita niya na yung ratio of the aphelion and the perihelion, the closest to the sun and the farthest to the sun. The ratio of these orbits, of the different planets, had differences which he called intervals, and they all the differences of the orbit of the planets conform to the human singing voice.
Oh my gosh, kakaiba ha? In other words, there's a reason.
There is a principle.
There's a principle,
there
a divine principle.
Exactly, a universal principle.
Oh, wow.
That is how it was created. Now, human singing voice, right? What seemed to be in chaos, as if anyone will observe, is actually in a certain order, and that's when he wrote his piece called Harmony of the Words. When they are in a certain order, if they are harmonious starts, you relate to music.
Oh,
right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Pero, well, from an astrologer's point of view naman it jives. It jives. Yung nga lang may explanation sa science. Ang galing.
It's nice to be able to see this. So when you see that now, he discovered this. And he was telling people who were in music, follow this principle. And the teachers of Beethoven and the Mozart, sila Haydn and their teachers, followed the same principle. Because that was a great discovery of principle. And so much so that they developed kinds of music that became lifetime
and universal.
No other music that you can think of would have lasted this long, right? No, but they did. These guys had created this. One of my favorites, when I use it for pedagogical, is the chorus that was made by Mozart called the Ave Verum. The Ave Verum was made out of the course of 4 voices, and I explained to them that each voice is different, and when you hear one individual voice, it goes a certain way and it has a certain character to it, right? And so does the soprano, and so does the alto and the bass. So they're nice. But when you put them together, it creates something inside. It's no longer just listening to it.
It affects you.
It affects you.
Yes.
And immediately since it was Ave Verum, hail to the truth. That was the last piece of Mozart. It was it conveys a very strong message. Union. And that is what classical music and principles does. Now, you apply the same things, what he had discovered in music, to social relationships. You are all different. But when we have this different, we have our own different something, we will be much more efficient, effective, right? That is the principle that is being conveyed there. When all of this get together, the beauty that you create is much more, is in a different level, right? You apply it again, social relationship, you apply it to communities, to countries. When everybody works together, the kind of success that man is going to reach is much more than what we have. Instead of, what is the reverse of that? The reverse of that in economics is free market. Why? Free market means labanan ka, and the weak ones fall by the wayside. No? That is the free market. That is the economics that we're practicing. And based on fair market and man's collaboration in order to reach a higher goal for everybody. No? That is the principle that whole thing of Kepler taught us. So it's not just music, not just not culture, no? It is science, the same concept in science, same concept in economics. You see? And we must understand that, no? So that if you will start to understand it, then share it and act in the same manner, and then move towards it. And then you will know very easily who are against that kind of principle.
Yes, tama.
Hindi ba?
Tama. Mas makikita. Parang may connection din yan sa sinasabi ko as a psychic, yung collective consciousness. Kasi it affects the collective consciousness. It's like also the power of prayer.
Yes.
Whatever prayer were different when we pray, and yet nagtutugmayan.
That's right.
So it's the same. Ang ganda nga na nakikita ko yung connection. Ang ganda. Ang ganda.
It's the same.
Yes, it's the same.
And the more people realize it, the better.
And then tama kayo. Kasi yung ayaw, makikita why.
Makikita mo.
Lalabas yan. So makikita yung mga alam niyo na.
Yeah. And
totoo.
Then you identify who is against man and who is for human beings, di ba?
Yes.
Madali, mas madali.
Kumbaga para sa music, makikita kung sinisintonado.
Oo. Exactly.
Makikita kasi wala hindi na harmonious
And then, but kung minsan meron tayong nakikita sa music na ang tawag dito.
Grace notes, yung mga
yung you connect.
Yeah, you connect.
Pero yung connection na yun is a little parang dissonant.
Parang dissonant. Pero may meaning din yun.
Kung wala yung dissonance na yun, hindi mo makakonect doon sa kabila. Right?
Minsan meron ganun.
Ganyan yun sa Avivero.
Yes.
You get to see it especially in the tenor. No? The tenor is the one that's very difficult because the one singing it has to have the discipline to go against the tendency of being in harmony. He has to go a little off. The way what's his name? Mozart did it. Genius talaga. And you will see that it was pointed to us, I didn't know at the time, pointed to us that once you have that dissonance, the whole thing sounds better.
Yes.
With that dissonant note of the tenor. Without that, you will see there's something wrong.
Yes.
No? And that's the beauty of it. No? Di ba?
Yes. Pero yun, tama yun. Ganda.